It's a beautiful sunny day in August, and I'm just back from teaching 2 foraging courses on the island of Cape Breton. With those done, it's time to resume our organic gardening videos. And now is a perfect time to touch on the oft-overlooked topic of daylilies and how delicious they are. It's also time to take our third look at leeks, because it's time to do their second transplanting and be sure we mutilate the roots along the way to encourage growth. Daylilies are popular among horticulturalists and landscapers because they are fairly easy to grow and once established are also carefree. In fact, if given a little opportunity, they will volunteer in other regions of a yard or go feral. Yet they rarely ever take over a region so aggressively as to become a problem. And these very points make them also excellent food crop choices for persons who would like their gardens to be as carefree as possible. It is relatively easy to identify daylilies. They are monocots, which means their blossoms will have petals in multiples of 3, and daylilies have 6 petals. The flowers appear at the top of smooth, round stalks that have a white, powdery covering. And near to where the blossom stalks emerge, the leaves emerge directly from the ground. They can often reach 60 or 70 centimeters long and emerge from the ground narrow but widen about mid-length, then taper to lanceolate points. As with all monocot plants, they have a simple vein structure that runs the length of the plant with very little webbing in between the vein structure. In terms of cultivation, they are tall and vigorous and typically outcompete weeds that grow around them. For food use, everything but the leaves is great. Their little tubers are kind of like sweet potatoes. The young stalks before they flower have a unique flavor all their own. The flowers themselves have the least flavor, but they are good for thickening soups and stews, kind of like okra. But to me, the real prize are the buds, just before they open. These can be sautéed and eaten as a vegetable all by themselves, though I really like them best in vegetable medleys and on stir-fries. While I have several feral patches of daylilies near my cottage, I like them so much I think I'm going to devote a full bed of my gardens to growing them. Now it's time for us to take our third look at how to grow leeks. Many people I know struggle to get leeks to grow large, but over the years I've had tremendous success with leeks. The thing to understand about leeks, though, is you have to encourage their growth, and the way we do this is we disrupt their growth. That might sound counterintuitive, but believe me, it works. If you followed the earliest lessons of organic gardening, you saw that I began planting leeks in trays. Once the last danger of frost was gone, I transplanted the leeks, then 6 to 12 inches tall, from those trays into a small part of the garden. At that time they were only about as big as grass, and they only occupied a couple meters of length of one of the beds. The rest of the bed I intentionally let go to weeds, because a very common weed in these parts is the delectable lamb's quarter, which we harvest like a crop unto itself. Once I harvested the lamb's quarter, Daphne and I hoed out and removed the weeds, and got the leek bed ready for its second transplanting. The process is fairly simple and straightforward. Using your hand or a small trowel, dig out each individual leek. No matter what you use, be sure to get your hand all the way under the leek and pull it up. Never pull the leeks from the top, or you would run the risk of accidentally breaking them in half. Disrupting or mutilating the leek's roots is good, but breaking them in half is very bad. They would die. Damaging their roots is what encourages the leeks to grow yet bigger and sweeter. I've already transplanted the leeks on the north side of this bed, and now for demonstration purposes here, I'm going to transplant the leeks on the south side of this bed. As you do this, be sure to pull any grasses, sedges, and clovers that you may have left behind in your weeding, or they will take deep root and spread everywhere by runners. Leeks, while disease and insect resistance and extremely cold hardy, are terrible at competing against weeds. They are very slow growers, and until they get close to their full size, they just aren't very big at competing for space or sunlight. With your leeks prepared, dig small holes about 4 to 6 inches deep in your beds. Into each hole, insert a biodegradable jig to guide the leek's growth. We save old toilet paper rolls. They guide the leek up and out, keep surrounding soil from collapsing in on the leek, and shield the lower part of the leek from sunlight, which allows it to blanch and become extra tasty and tender. If where you live the soil has more silt in it than our soil, you may not need to use a jig. If you can poke holes about 4 to 6 inches deep and 2 inches wide into your soil with something like the haft of a shovel, and those holes will remain for several weeks, then your soil is probably stiff enough that you don't need a jig to guide it. But here the soil is very soft and sandy, and if I didn't use these jigs, the soil would quickly collapse back on the leeks. It is very important to keep the soil away from the leek's body, because the leek will grow into the space that's available to it. Once it makes contact with soil, at least this variety of leek, it doesn't get any bigger. Once you've transplanted each leek, put a pinch of dust into each jig, just a little pinch to help the roots set, and then put a little water down into each jig to help the roots get an initial start growing into their new ground. Over the next 2 or 3 days, the leeks will wilt and look like they're just about to die. Don't worry, leeks are very hardy. The roots will set into the ground, they'll soon reinvigorate and get bigger than you've ever seen them grow before. When we revisit leeks again, it'll be harvest time.